Okay, rockers, I'm HoJo, and before we get into this week's episode, Hunzi and I wanted to let you know that if you enjoy HoJo and Hunzi's Hard Rock House, then we'd like you to tell us what you think of our podcast.
I'm Hunzi, and that's right, HoJo. We want to know what our single-digit listeners enjoy about what we're doing and what we could actually do to make it better.
Nothing, surely.
Pop band war stories. Do you want to hear from HoJo's glory days back in the 80s as one of the main writers on Metal Bible, Kerrang?
I could tell you about the time I got arrested at a Vardis gig, or when Bruce Dickinson and I picked up these girls behind the Iron Curtain in Poland, or when I went to a party at Pete Way's house in London and he ordered up...
All right. We get the picture. We also want you to give us any rock-related subject matter that you'd like on a weekly pod.
So if you reckon the world of spandex needs a thorough investigation,
or you need to know which rock and roll lyrics are the dumbest ever, then let us know and we'll talk your ears off and most likely make you laugh a lot.
You can get hold of me and Hunzi via our Instagram,
which is HoJo_and_Hunzi. I couldn't find an easier one.
Let's hope Twitter's easier, which is
just HoJo and Hunzi.
That's better. Or Facebook,
HoJo and Hunzi's Hard Rock House. Or, if you're strictly old school like us, you can even email us at hojoandhunzi@gmail.com.
That's HoJoandHunnsy@gmail.com. So, let us know what it is you want from HoJo and Hunzi's Hard Rock House, then sit back, assume the position, and we'll do the rest.
And without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. What time is it, HoJo?
It's time to rock! Hello. I'm HoJo.
I'm Hunzi.
And welcome to this, the 9th episode of HoJo and Hunzi's Hard Rock House, the safe space for old rock gumbies just like us, where we rock till we drop, and we rock, never stop. Unless, of course, the missus asks you to put some Taylor Swift on, at which point we always jump to it, don't we, Hunzi?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we know what side our bread's buttered on, don't we?
Exactly.
So here we are again, the 9th episode. Who would believe it? The single-digit listener is getting overexcited, I imagine.
I actually think we'll get to 10. I do. I'm pretty...
That's just one more. Yeah, imagine that, double figures.
I know, incredible. 10 episodes. But we're not there yet. We've got 9 to get out of the way first, so let's crack on.
So we know the format. The format stays the same, like the song. So tell me, Hunzi, what has been rocking your world this week?
Okay, mate. So what I've been listening to today, actually, is the second album from a band called Enuff's Enuff.
But more people with spelling problems. Every time you seem to bring a band to the table these days, episode before last, it was Rothschild. They had spelling trouble, didn't they? And today, Enuff's Enuff is more spelling trouble.
Everybody knows how they spell Enuff's Enuff. ENUFFZ''NUFF.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah, so Enuff's Enuff, second album.
Title?
Strength. It's called Strength. And I think it's their best album. I did love their first record. And the second album, Strength, which is the one I've been listening to, kind of didn't really do anything. The record company, which for the life of me, I don't know which one it was. I think it might be
East West, wasn't it?
Was it East West? It might have
been East West.
Literally did nothing to promote it, even though that first record had pretty not a hit on it, not hits, but New Thing was a popular song in the rock clubs, I remember, and Fly High Michelle and all that sort of stuff. So they'd already built quite a good crowd up. And this second record, I remember it coming out and being surprised that it was out. I was like, oh, I never knew. Obviously, these were the days before the internet where you never knew when a record was coming out anyway.
No, well, not unless you'd scoured the music press. That's true.
Exactly. So it was 1991, I believe, came out, which obviously was when the grunge wars started.
Yeah, very much so.
And heavy metal and hard rock was definitely under the cosh in the trenches, getting absolutely hammered by grunge bombs. But it came out. I was surprised to see it. Obviously excited because I did like their first record.
I've just done research, by the way. It was on the Atco label.
Right. Okay, you've done the research. So you're doing the research now, as opposed to me not doing it before we came on.
There you go. But we know this is how it's going to go from now on. You do no research, and I do research (brackets). Look it up on Wikipedia while we're recording.
There you go. So it was on the Atco label, which I believe was the same label as Blackfoot. Is that right?
Yes, it was, absolutely.
Because I remember that from the opening of Blackfoot's Highway Song Live. Echo recording artist.
There you go. Yeah, spot on.
So back to Strength. It follows the pattern of the first record. It's kind of in that power poppy, glammy. They just had more melodies, I felt, and more tunes than a lot of the bands around at the time. Clearly, they had a massive leaning towards the Beatles in terms of like the melodies and the harmonies and stuff like that. And the second record, Strength, just dials that up even more. I was listening to it this morning, and it reminded me of how much I do love this record. It's got a few what you might call plodders of kind of like rock songs, riffs, okay. Good riffs, good harmonies, all that sort of stuff. But
plodders all the same.
Yeah, plodders, but good plodders. But
that's a tautology, I think. But anyway, carry on.
There's 2 or 3 tracks that clearly go back to the Beatles' influence.
Which ones are they, Hansi?
The title track is very, very Beatles influenced. And there's one towards the end of the album called Goodbye. It could almost have been written by Lennon and McCartney.
Okay. That's high praise indeed.
It is, but I'm not going to fall to this, you can't say that because Lennon and McCartney were... Bollocks to that. I think it's as good as, not everything that Lennon and McCartney have written, but it's definitely up there. It could have easily been a Beatles song. I would urge anybody to go and listen to this record. It's got power pop influences, it's got rock influences, it's got Beatles influences, and it's just full of harmonies, full of melodies, and just full of great tunes. And it kind of disappeared.
What's interesting to me about this is I know a little bit about Enuff's Enough. For some reason, when they first emerged, I don't know, I didn't dial into them. And that was weird because there were a lot of people liking them. I remember one of the Kerrang writers, Phil Wilding, was a real fan of Enuff's Enough. New Thing and Fly High Michelle, which was off the first album from 89, were really great pop rock songs. They were fantastic. I remember hearing those songs and thinking these guys could be the worthy successors to Cheap Trick, which is high praise indeed.
Yeah, exactly. I can see why you said that.
And then the weird thing was, like you say, it dropped off the radar because Strength, the album you're talking about, just completely passed me by. I'm not even sure I've ever listened to it, which is a bit weird. But you're saying to me that album is up there with the first one?
I think it's better than the first one.
Wow, that's really interesting. So that's definitely something that needs to get a play on the HoJo digital turntable.
I think you'll really like it. And I think you'll come on to episode 10 and go, thank you.
Thank you, Hunzi. You know, the funny thing is about Enuff's Enough, like I said, I missed the party first time around, but probably 3 years ago, I interviewed Donnie V. Is it Donnie V or Donnie Vi?
I think it's V.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's V. He had a very publicised fallout with Chips Enuff, didn't he?
Yeah, Chips Enuff. Yeah, Donnie V did have a public falling out, and also I think might be a troubled soul. I don't know if you know too much of his history. I think he's been fairly open about his problems with substance abuse and what have you. And I think might have that thing that a lot of creative artists have inside of them, which is that self-destroy button. That when things are going too well, they kind of like to sabotage everything. I think maybe he's gone down that road. I interviewed him about 3 years ago, and he had this record out called Beautiful Things. Do you know it?
I do know it.
Oh, I think Beautiful Things is one of the best. I think you'd be hard pressed to call it a hard rock album.
Yes.
It's probably more Beatlesy than Enuff's Enough were. It's very melody conscious. Everything's based around really strong melody. And a lot of it does shamelessly pay homage to the Beatles. I don't think it rips the Beatles off. It pays homage to them. But there are some songs on that record that are absolutely fantastic.
I think what's interesting about Enuff's Enough and Cheap Trick and the similarities between both bands. Cheap Trick, clearly influenced by the Beatles. I mean, God, Cheap Trick even recorded Sgt. Pepper's, didn't they? So both from Chicago.
Illinois, I think. Yeah, probably not from Chicago itself.
So I believe Enuff's Enough are from an area in Illinois, which is a name of one of their songs called Blue Island.
Yes, that's true. I remember reading that.
I would definitely say that both bands are definitely on that curve of Beatles influence. And going back to that Donnie V record, and you're right, it just takes the harmonies and the Beatles melodies to a new level, doesn't it? Standout
tracks is Beautiful Things. It's a fantastic track. There's a song called Fly, which is really beautiful. It's an album that is all killer, no filler. But big warning sign, don't expect it to be blowing your speakers and your ears off, because it's not that kind of record, but it is a fantastic record. One thing I was wondering about Enuff's Enough is while I'm doing my internet research, reading Wikipedia, they've got a staggering amount of albums that serve since that debut in 1989. I'm just, 3, 5, 8, 10, 13, 17 albums, if I'm not counting badly. My counting's not the greatest, but, a serious amount of records. Now, my question for you is, I'm assuming you'll be the same as me. I'm not going to put my hand up and say, I've listened to all 17 of Enuff's albums. Have you?
No.
Not even close?
I think the last one that I remember listening to when it came out was probably an album called Tweaked.
Okay, yeah. 1995 was Tweaked.
Yeah.
So since then, they've had 3, 6, 9, 12 albums since Tweaked.
Wow.
And have you listened to any of them?
I did listen to the last one, which I think came out a couple of years ago, purely and simply because I was just interested to find out what they've been doing. But it didn't make me go back and go, oh, they're still on form. I think the fallout between Donnie and Chip's Enuff, subsequently Donnie leaving the band, meant they lost a huge amount of their songwriting abilities.
I suspect that's true. But I also like the fact that Donnie and Chip had a bit of a Lennon and McCartney style falling out. That's very good, isn't it? They really are taking that Beatles obsession to the nth degree. The question that springs to mind, Hunzi, is what happens when you suddenly go, that's it, I'm out? I don't know either. There are loads of bands where you go, oh yeah, I really like those 2 records or those 3 records. And they go, yeah, but they've put out another 12 since then. You go, no, I haven't listened to them. And then you go, why?
Several factors. Personal circumstances change, right? You kind of...
Your wife doesn't want heavy metal in the house. That's the main one.
There might be that. You stop buying records. If you think about it, post-95, everything changed post-95. The internet came. And
yeah, true.
Everything changed. So the way that you consume music changed. There was more to consume via the internet. Napster changed things and all that sort of stuff. There's so much. You miss the fact that Enuff's Enuff have got a new album out. It just probably gets lost in the noise. And at the time, you might find another band that you really like. They fall down the pecking order of your interest, I guess, which means that when your ears are pricked up because someone mentions them, you tend to go back to the stuff that you know already and go, oh yeah, I love that record, rather than discovering something new that they've done.
Now, I think you're right that the ready availability of music to stream at any time of the day or night was clearly a big factor in things being swamped and that you couldn't really keep up. There was just too much stuff out there. But I think there's something deeper as well. Do you not think there's a time in your life, the music that you listen to, the life you're leading is very driven by a musical lifestyle? Everything you did was based around going to gigs, meeting bands, drinking, talking about bands, drinking, talking about more bands, doing some more drinking, talking about some more bands. You know what I mean?
There's a pattern.
There's a pattern emerging. And as you get older, that way of processing music changes, doesn't it? I think it takes something really special for it to register with you. And in some ways, when I tell you what I've been listening to this week, it fits with that idea that for something to break through the life stage you're at, it takes a lot for a record to make an impression now. Do you find that?
Definitely. My relationship with Enuff's Enuff, my last album that I remember listening to properly because it was a new record, was 1995's Tweaked.
Yeah.
That coincided with me moving to London. Now, when I moved to London, going back to your point around the drinking and the bands and the drinking and the bands, it was kind of, that pretty much became my life. So I was going to see bands all the time. The scene in London was changing. And I think that I was exposed to different bands and different styles of metal and rock, the power poppy stuff of the Enuff's Enuffs and the Cheap Tricks and all those bands that I absolutely loved. There weren't any bands doing that. Bands were moving in a different direction, whether it be harder, faster, dirtier, grungier, whatever it is. So you tended to immerse yourself in that scene. You didn't really remember what you'd been listening to right like that because your world was covered in all sorts of different other bands like the Alice in Chains of this world and all that sort of stuff at that time probably meant that my relationship with Enuff's Enuff disappeared a little bit. And
then it's really hard to get it back. It's like trying to go back out with an old girlfriend, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's really difficult.
It is.
So what you're trying to tell me, Hunzi, is that 1996's Peach Fuzz album by Enuff's Enuff didn't really cross your radar, did it?
No, not really.
Mine neither, I must say. The interesting question that comes out of this is, after we've finished recording today, are you going to go, okay, I'm going to go and pick an Enuff's Enuff album at random, 2009's Dissonance or 2010, and give them another chance? Because I think I know what the answer is.
I'm going to, yeah, of course.
Oh, you are? Right, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised because I think I'd be just going, nah, probably not. I'll go back to the Enuff's Enough album.
No, you're going to go and listen to Strength. But in the spirit of doing research as we go, I've looked up here, I can see that in 2021, they released a Beatles cover album.
Hard Rock Night is a Beatles covers album, is it?
Yeah, and obviously spelled Nite, because you've got to...
See, you're back to the spelling thing, Onzi. That's your weakness, isn't it?
We should get on to what you've been listening to.
Okay, so we were talking about bands that were key to when you were first moving to London, living a more rock and roll lifestyle than you do now in your lovely suburban house. The band that I've been listening to this week, a band that I paid no attention to first time around, and then came across my radar because I had to review the album for Rock Candy, and really surprised me. It's my favourite hard rock album of the year so far.
Wow.
So who do you think it is? It's a band that I bet you love, and I thought I'd never heard any of their songs, but then after I'd listened to this new record, I went back and listened to some early stuff of theirs and recognised one or two things. But a band that really, again, passed me by. I really had nothing to do with them when they first came out. And I think that was, again, to do with the fact that their first album came out in 1991 and was blown away by the grunge explosion because this was a hair metal, pretty boyish band. So who do you think that might be?
Well, I must...
From San Francisco. I'll give you a little tip.
Right. Well, the only reason I know who it is, right?
Okay.
is because I have read your said review.
Ah, yes. In your capacity as designer-in-chief of Rock Candy magazine, you actually read some of this stuff.
Well, I don't read all of it. So what I do is read the stuff as I'm designing it that perks my interest because I want to know what someone said about it. Probably because I like or liked the aforementioned band back in the day.
Okay, so that band is?
Vain.
Yeah, Vain. So, number one, were you surprised when I said that it was my favourite hard rock album of the year so far?
I was very surprised. I could well imagine that their debut album, No Respect, which is a great album, passed you by at the time because it probably went against everything that you were listening to at the time.
Yeah.
You just probably thought, oh, another band trying to jump on the hair, the glam and all that sort of stuff.
Very much so.
But they were so much more than that, I always felt. But when I read your review and you said it's your favourite rock album of the year, I was like, right, I'm going to have to speak to HoJo about this because it might have had his name as the person who wrote the review, but I don't think he wrote it. I think he gave it to somebody else to write.
Well, do you know what? Absolutely not. I was amazed. The album came in, stuck it on, not expecting very much, and frankly, was absolutely blown away by it.
Is it in the same vein as their first album, No Respect? Have they tried to do something different, or what is it?
It's always the double-edged sword, isn't it? When you go, oh yeah, hope you like our new direction, or we've evolved, or we've matured, or all those things. And quite often people go, can't you just do the fucking first record again? Because that's the one we like. But because I'm not that familiar with Vain's early work, I didn't really have a massive frame of reference. I've gone back since reviewing the album to take a listen. And I would say that it isn't a million miles away from what they were doing back then. Some of the more, I suppose, immature, that might be a bit harsh on that first record, the more pouty, posy, tight leather trouser, thrusting yourself into the camera kind of vibe is probably a little bit toned down. But it's definitely a hard rock record. It's not like they're trying to be, hope you like our new direction and they've gone alt country or anything. So it's very much a hard rock record, but it's really well crafted.
Right.
Davey Vain is a very good singer, which I was surprised by. Even though when I tried to go, who does he sound like? So I could try and describe it. I came to the conclusion that he sounded like a cross between Andrew Wood of Mother Love Bone.
Yeah.
Which you go, okay, I think we can all accept that's cool. And then I thought, there's a bit of Vince Neil in there. And Vince Neil being one of my most hated vocalists, I was really surprised to find myself making that comparison.
It's only a little bit of Vince Neil.
What do you think, though? Is that fair? Andrew Wood meets Vince Neil?
I think, yeah. And thankfully, that's 90% Andrew Wood and only 10% Vince Neil. I agree.
And if I were to try and describe the music, I guess I would say 47% Guns N' Roses, 53% Mother Love Bone.
That's interesting. I'm going to say it again. It sounds like it's very much in the vein of their first record.
Yeah, as I say, but more sophisticated, better arrangements, better guitar playing. The guitar player, there's a very interesting story behind this. I think she's called Dana Nova. I'm going to just do a little bit of...
Is she the daughter of Aldo Nova?
No, wouldn't that be something? No, the story behind this is that Delana Nova Scott. The interesting thing about Delana Nova Scott is Delana is a trans person who was in the band between 1986 and 1981, 1993 to 1994, and then 2000 to the present. She's still in the band today and is a person who's transitioned. You'll know this as well as I do. I've got skin in that particular game because one of my children is trans, but it was very interesting to read her story. She's actually become extremely well respected as a designer of custom amps.
Wow.
Yeah, and apparently she's done very well out of it because obviously I went down a rabbit hole and started reading up on her. Yeah. And yeah, she's very well respected and has made amps and preamps and all that stuff for lots of top people and has had her amps used on the road by The Who and Lenny Kravitz, I think. And she's a big noise in the world of high-tech gear.
Wow, that's incredible. Apart from Davey Vane himself, are there any other original members still in the band? Like,
I believe so. Tom Rickard is the drummer.
Yeah, the drummer.
Yeah, he's there. And Ash Mitchell, who's the bass player, he's still there. I've got to give you some highlights. Cold Like Snow is really great. It's like an anthemic rock song, really good. But then there's other stuff. There's a song called The Flowers, which has got a real funk feel to it, but not in any way, God forbid, like the funk metal of Extreme. No dungarees in this one.
Thank God.
That's great. And there's a pop rock song called Can't You See Me Floating? But I was really genuinely impressed. The album's called Disintegrate Together. That's the last song on it. And that's a real epic sweep. Not ballad, a soft song that rises to a crescendo without being a ballad. Frankly, I was absolutely amazed because I was literally expecting to come to that album and just be laughing and chortling going, oh dear, why don't these boys just give up? Because they never got anywhere the first time around, did they?
No, not at all. We don't know what happened, but again, timing. No Respect comes out 1989. It probably came out. So by the time they had any chance of getting a bit of momentum, the grunge wars had started.
And the grunge wars literally did for everything that had been associated with anything to do with high hair or flouncy clothing or glam look, just did for everything.
It's almost worth us doing an episode of this podcast where we name a handful of bands that were killed by grunge before they even got off the ground.
But take it from me, Vane, a real surprise.
There you go.
Frankly, a very welcome surprise. And I've been listening to that a lot. It's been annoying my wife no end. As if she's not annoyed enough. She's got a terrible cough this week. And then I make her listen to Vane. So divorce could be on the cards. So worth a go. Now, the problem that we've got today, Hunzi, is we've waffled on so long that we've run out of time. I think that's okay. I think sometimes we don't mind just talking about the albums that we've listened to because they lead off into all sorts of little alleyways, don't they?
Exactly. It's not a bad thing. I
think that's not a bad thing at all. So I think what we'll do is hold it back for the next issue because people will be bound to come back if I tell you now. You'll get all juiced up by this as well. That I was going to say our next episode, we must talk about the phenomenon that is Tommy Lee.
Or could we not talk about that today?
We won't be able to do him full justice.
Are we going to talk about his book where he has a conversation with his penis?
Oh, that's brilliant. I didn't know that. Okay, right. So you've got a lot to bring to the party. And this is good because we can both do research on this and bring more and more stories. The reason I wanted to talk about Tommy Lee this week is, do you know there's an American chat show host called Bill Maher, or he might be called Maher. It's Maher. Some of our single-digit American listeners will hopefully enlighten us on how you actually pronounce that, whether it's Mayer or Mar.
Yeah, I'm vaguely aware of him, yeah.
Okay, so he's got this online thing that he calls Club Random, and he just gets people in, and I think there's strong drink taken and possibly a bit of puff, because now obviously people can do these shows online and they're not tied to some kind of major corporate entity who are worried about their identity and how people are going to perceive them. I think a lot of these people who built a career for themselves in mainstream media as chat show hosts, when they get older and they're probably put out to pasture by the major TV networks, they go off and do their own little thing online, and they don't give a fuck, and they can say whatever they like. And I think that's where Bill Mayer is with this. Right. But he gets people in there. The reason that I wanted to talk about Tommy Lee was because he was on it, and he's a funny lad. It's like somebody took a beautiful looking person, unscrewed the top of their head, took the brain out, found the one bit that is brilliant at drumming, and just put that back in and then screwed it all up again. So the only thing Tommy Lee is good at is drumming, apart from, of course, making you laugh by just saying dumb things. But Bill Mayer must have been drunk or stoned, because in this interview, he literally just said to Tommy Lee, I don't know if you've ever had to sit through reading Marcel Proust. Marcel Proust is a late 1800s or early 1900s French novelist. He's very highbrow. And the idea that you'd be asking Tommy Lee if he'd read Marcel Proust.
Had he?
Well, no, of course not.
Oh, right, okay.
He just went, dude, and didn't answer the question. But the idea that anyone would ask Tommy Lee whether they'd read Marcel Proust really tickled me, and obviously made me think Bill Mayer is clearly doing that program drunk or stoned. But it just made me think, Tommy Lee, what a rich vein to dig down into, because that man, there is so much to discuss, isn't there? And I think that we would be doing him a disservice now. We've given people a little taster. We're going to rattle through what we've been listening to on the next podcast a little more quickly than we've done today. And we're going to dedicate our time to Tommy Lee, his conversation with his penis, his thesis that he wrote for a master's on Marcel Proust, and many other aspects of, well, you can only call him a phenomenon, can't you?
You could probably record 10 podcasts about Tommy Lee, couldn't you?
Maybe we will.
I had lunch with him once.
Well, hold that thought. Hunsey, it's been brilliant. I always love catching up with you. It's always fascinating to hear your insights into the world of hard rock on HoJo and Hunsey's Hard Rock House. And do go away, do some thinking about Tommy Lee. I'm very intrigued to hear about you having lunch with him, and I'm going to recount some more funny tales about him, and we'll get into a long discussion of a legend in his own lifetime.
His book was called Tommy Land.
Of course it was.
Which I do believe I have somewhere in a box in my garage.
Again, because you'd be scared that your wife might see it and think, is this the man I'm married to?
It is absolutely hilarious.
Is it inadvertently hilarious?
Yes.
Or is it hilariously hilarious?
Both.
Okay, exciting.
As I said, there is an entire part of the book where he has a conversation with his penis.
Marvellous. I can't wait to hear more. Anyway, we're going to wind it up there. Great catching up, mate. I'll be seeing you for Tommy Lee special, Tommy Lee penis special. I think it's a fitting way to celebrate episode 10 of HoJo and Hunsey's Hard Rock House.
Can we possibly get him on? Do you think we can get him on at any point?
No.
All right, can we get his penis on?
I think putting a request to his agent for his penis.
Right.
All right, my friend. I'll speak to you anon.
See you later. Ciao.
See you later.
Bye.